Tonight from downtown Indianapolis, the Fever welcome in the Seattle Storm with major playoff implications on the line tonight.
All right, y'all, look, it's a big one tonight, okay? It's an important one. This has got to be our best 40 minutes. This has got to be our most intentional 40 minutes in everything that we do, okay? Look, no one person needs to do anything outside of themselves, right? But every single person in this locker room needs to be the best version of themselves.
What if I told you one night in Indianapolis didn't just end in a win, it rewrote history 6 different ways? What if a team that was battered, shorthanded, and written off before tip-off ended up sending shockwaves through the entire WNBA? That's exactly what happened when the Indiana Fever took the floor against the Seattle Storm. On the surface, it looked like another regular season game. But from the very first possession, something felt different inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Caitlin Clark was in street clothes, still sidelined with injury, yet her presence loomed over everything. Her brand, her logo, her aura filled the building. Nike had chosen this night to unveil her double C emblem, plastering it across shirts, banners, and giant displays outside the arena. Fans showed up not just to watch basketball, but to be part of an event that felt bigger than the game itself. But that was only the beginning. Because while Clark's logo lit up the city, her teammates lit up the scoreboard. Indiana didn't just survive without their superstar, they dominated. They didn't just win, they crushed Seattle by 20 points. And hidden inside that blowout were performances that shattered record after record, rewriting what this young roster is capable of. From scary collisions that tested their toughness, to career milestones that carved new names into the record books, to a level of grit that made the entire league take notice, this was a night nobody saw coming. And by the time the final buzzer sounded, the Fever weren't just another team clinging to playoff hope, they looked like the future of the WNBA. So buckle in, because this is the story of how one game turned into a turning point. The injuries, the history, the comeback, and what it all means once Caitlin Clark finally returns. Caitlin Clark never touched the court that night, but you wouldn't have known it by looking around Gainbridge Fieldhouse. From the moment fans poured through the doors, it was clear this wasn't just a basketball game. It was a showcase, a cultural event, and Clark's fingerprints were everywhere. Nike had chosen this exact night to unveil her new Double C logo, and the rollout turned the arena into something closer to a championship celebration than a late-season matchup. Outside, the symbol glowed across towering displays. Inside, thousands of fans were handed white shirts emblazoned with the logo, creating a unified sea of Clark's brand across the stands. When the lights dimmed before tip-off, the building pulsed as if it were alive, her name echoing even though she was still stuck in street clothes for the 16th straight game. The effect was undeniable. Every camera shot that caught Clark sitting courtside drew as much reaction as the plays unfolding on the floor. Reporters called the venue Caitlin Clark Arena for the night, and the fans embraced it, treating the debut of her brand like a historic milestone. For a player sidelined with injury, Clark still commanded the entire spotlight, but beneath the celebration was a layer of tension. This wasn't just about Clark's logo or her popularity. The Fever were fighting for their season, and Clark wasn't the only one missing. Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, and Ari McDonald were all out. That meant 5 players gone, and a playoff race slipping into dangerous territory. If Indiana stumbled, the party would have ended in heartbreak. And yet, instead of collapsing under the weight of expectations, the team thrived. As Clark's symbol glowed across the walls, her teammates carried the floor, playing with an intensity that felt like they were defending her honor. The story of the night was no longer just about her brand. It was about the team that refused to let her absence define them. This contrast, a superstar shaping the arena from the sideline, while her teammates fought for survival on the court, set the stage for one of the most unexpected performances of the season. The scoreboard may have shown 0-0 at tip-off, but the Fever were already trailing before the game even began. Indiana entered the night not just missing Caitlin Clark, but stripped of nearly every guard who could steady the floor. Sydney Colson, the veteran voice of calm, was lost to a torn ACL. Ari McDonald, one of their quickest defenders, was sidelined with a fractured foot. Sophie Cunningham, the sharpshooter who stretched defenses thin, was ruled out with injury. And Chloe Bi, another energy guard, joined the list in street clothes. 5 players gone, nearly half a rotation erased. For most teams, that would spell disaster. For Indiana, it was a crisis stacked on top of a playoff race already teetering. Coming in, the Fever had dropped 4 of their last 5. sliding down the standings and dangerously close to falling out of the postseason picture altogether. A stumble against Seattle would have been more than just another loss. It could have unraveled everything. Coach Stephanie White knew it too. Before the game, she admitted bluntly that Indiana had no choice but to treat this matchup like a playoff battle. Every possession mattered. Every rebound mattered. Every shot mattered. The margin for error was gone. This wasn't about fine-tuning strategies or conserving energy for a deeper run. This was survival basketball. And everyone in the locker room knew it. Aaliyah Boston, the cornerstone in the paint, carried the weight most heavily. With guards sidelined, she wasn't just a scorer or rebounder, she had to be the heartbeat, the one to absorb pressure and force the game to bend Indiana's way. Without Clark feeding her the ball in rhythm, Boston needed to fight through mismatches, create her own looks, and still anchor the defense. As White put it, when AB plays aggressive, there's nobody that can stop her. The challenge was enormous. Keep playoff hopes alive while missing stars, leaning on new faces, and facing a Seattle team with postseason ambitions of its own. And yet, instead of breaking under the weight, Indiana turned the pressure into fuel. That tension, walking into a must-win game with a roster stitched together by desperation, created the atmosphere that would make every highlight, every collision, and every record-breaking moment feel magnified. It was playoff intensity without the playoff label, and the Fever had no choice but to rise to it. Just minutes into the first quarter, with the energy in the building still buzzing from Clark's logo reveal and the opening possessions, everything changed in an instant. A loose ball rolled near midcourt, and Lexi Hull dove to secure it. At the same time, Seattle's Gabby Williams came crashing in from the opposite angle. The two collided violently, heads smashing together with a sound that echoed through Gainbridge Fieldhouse like a hammer strike. The crowd gasped. The noise stopped. And then came the sight that made stomachs sink. Hull staggering to her feet with a massive lump swelling across her forehead. Trainers rushed over as fans covered their mouths in shock. This was a team already playing without 5 key contributors, and now one of their toughest defenders looked like she might be finished before the night even began. For a moment, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the arena. The celebration turned into silence. And for Indiana, the thought was unavoidable. How much more could they take? But then, something remarkable happened. Hull refused to stay down. Barely 10 minutes later, with the swelling still visible, she checked back into the game to a standing ovation. Her toughness flipped the entire mood. The same arena that had fallen silent erupted into cheers, and her teammates fed off the surge of energy. After the game, Aaliyah Boston summed it up simply, "Lexi is the definition of tough." Coach Stephanie White went even further, calling the hit disgusting, but praising Hull for embodying the grit that has kept this team alive. And Hull herself? She brushed it off with a laugh, later joking that everyone kept telling her she looked beautiful with the lump. That moment, Hull walking back onto the floor, when most players would have been done for the night, became a symbol. It wasn't just about toughness, it was about resilience. About refusing to fold no matter how battered, bruised, or short-handed the Fever were. From that point on, Indiana played like a team possessed. They fought harder for every rebound. They attacked every loose ball. The energy shifted from fear to defiance, and Hull's example set the tone. What started as a frightening collision turned into the spark that lit the fire. And the Fever weren't about to let that flame burn out. From the opening tip, it was clear Indiana wasn't going to back down. Odyssey Sims set the tone immediately, tracking down the jump ball and racing coast to coast for the first bucket. That burst of energy carried into every possession, and the Fever came out swinging with an intensity that caught Seattle completely off guard. The first quarter told the story. Indiana poured in 22 points while suffocating the Storm's offense, forcing tough shots and turning rebounds into quick transition scores. Every time Seattle tried to settle in, the Fever pushed the pace, moving the ball crisply, finding shooters in rhythm, and attacking the rim with a determination that screamed, "This is our night." By halftime, the Fever led by double digits, but what stood out most wasn't just the score, it was the balance. Kelsey Mitchell slashed through the defense for layups, Odyssey Sims drained jumpers with confidence, and Aaliyah Boston bullied her way inside, drawing fouls and finishing strong. Even role players like Lexi Hull and Aerial Powers chipped in, crashing the boards and making hustle plays that swung momentum. Seattle, meanwhile, looked rattled. Every time they tried to close the gap, Indiana answered with a run. Williams and Lloyd couldn't find open space. Nneka Ogwumike fought to get going, but Boston and Turner made her work for every inch. The Storm simply never found rhythm, and by the end of the third quarter, Indiana's lead had stretched past 15. What made it even more remarkable was the consistency. This wasn't one hot shooting streak or a fluke quarter. Indiana scored at least 21 points in every single quarter while holding Seattle under 20 in 3 of them. The Fever controlled the pace from start to finish, never once trailing, never once allowing Seattle to believe they had a chance. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read 95-75, a 20-point blowout, the kind of win that sends a message not just to the opponent, but to the entire league. Even shorthanded, Indiana can dominate. For weeks, the Fever had been fighting to find their identity amid injuries and lineup shuffles. On this night, they found it, and they made it impossible to ignore. But this win wasn't just about the scoreline. Hidden inside the dominance were milestones that rewrote the franchise's history books, setting the stage for one of the most historic nights the Fever had ever seen. Start with this. Kelsey Mitchell wasn't supposed to be the headline. With Caitlin Clark sidelined and Nike turning the game into a spectacle, most expected the night to belong to Indiana's absent superstar. But by the end, it was Mitchell who owned the spotlight, etching her name into the record books with one of the most defining performances of her career. From the opening minutes, Mitchell attacked relentlessly. She darted around screens, slashed into the paint, and knocked down threes with confidence. But it wasn't just the efficiency, it was the weight of the moments. Every time Seattle tried to rally, it was Mitchell who buried their hope with another dagger. Her final line told the story. 21 points, steady playmaking, and the record that mattered most. Mitchell officially became the Fever's single-season scoring leader. She passed Caitlin Clark's mark, which had been set only a year earlier, proving that Indiana now had 2 generational scorers destined to push each other for years to come. But Mitchell didn't stop there. She also claimed the league lead in 20-point games this season, moving above stars like Aja Wilson and Brianna Stewart. She became the heartbeat of Indiana's attack, a scorer who could match anyone in the league shot for shot. And with Clark still working her way back, Mitchell showed she wasn't just holding down the fort, she was carrying the banner. What made it even more impressive was her consistency. Mitchell didn't explode for a single run and fade. She scored in every quarter, keeping pressure on Seattle from start to finish. When Indiana needed stability, she delivered. When they needed a spark, she lit it. And when the game needed a closer, she slammed the door. For years, Mitchell has been one of the WNBA's most underrated stars, known among diehards, but rarely in the MVP conversation. This performance forced people to take notice. She wasn't just a placeholder until Clark returned. She was a franchise cornerstone in her own right, capable of rewriting the future alongside her young teammate. By the end of the night, fans weren't just chanting for the Fever, they were chanting for Mitchell. And as her name echoed through Gainbridge, one thing became clear. She had turned a night built for Clark into a night that belonged to her. If Kelsey Mitchell was the firepower, Aaliyah Boston was the foundation. Game after game, she's carried the weight of Indiana's front line. And against Seattle, she once again proved why she's already being talked about among the greats. This wasn't just another strong outing, it was a night that added her name to history alongside some of the WNBA's biggest legends. Boston finished with 27 points, 13 rebounds, and the kind of commanding presence that made Seattle look helpless inside. Every touch in the paint was a mismatch. She sealed defenders deep, forced double teams, and still managed to carve through traffic for efficient buckets. Whenever the Storm tried to muscle her off her spot, she powered right back, showing the blend of strength and finesse that makes her nearly unstoppable. But beyond the box score, Boston reached 2 milestones that spoke volumes about her career trajectory. First, she hauled in her 1,000th career rebound, becoming only the second youngest player in league history to hit that mark, behind only Tina Charles. That achievement alone would have been historic. But Boston added another layer by also becoming the second fastest player in WNBA history to reach 1,000 rebounds and 350 assists, trailing only the legendary Candace Parker. Think about that. 2 names, Parker and Boston. That's the level she's already operating at in just her second season. Her dominance wasn't just in scoring or stats though. Boston anchored the defense, walling off the paint, contesting shots, and resetting possessions with outlet passes that sparked fast breaks. Every rebound she secured turned into an opportunity for Indiana to run. Every defensive stand reinforced the tone of toughness that the Fever had set early in the night. Even her teammates felt the difference. After the game, several players admitted that Boston's relentlessness gave them confidence. Her ability to control the interior allowed shooters like Mitchell and Sims to play freer, knowing the boards were secured behind them. Coach Stephanie White didn't hold back either. She praised Boston not just for her performance, but for her leadership, playing through constant double teams, absorbing hits, and still carrying herself like the anchor Indiana leans on every single night. Boston's milestones weren't just numbers on a page. They were proof that the Fever's rebuild has a cornerstone already blossoming into greatness. And in a game where Indiana's toughness defined the story, Boston stood as the clearest example of resilience. In a game defined by stars and milestones, the Fever still needed something more: the glue, the grit, the unsung heroes who could steady the ship when chaos hit. And on this night, Odyssey Sims and her supporting cast proved that Indiana's depth is far more dangerous than anyone expected. Sims had been signed out of necessity, a veteran brought in on a hardship contract to fill gaps while the Fever were battered by injuries. But instead of playing like a temporary replacement, she looked like a seasoned general, sliding seamlessly into the lineup and giving Indiana the stability it desperately needed. She didn't just score, though. Her 22 points lit up the scoreboard. She controlled tempo, broke down Seattle's defense, and hit the kind of momentum-shifting shots that left the Storm deflated. One play summed it up. With the shot clock winding down, Sims pulled up from nearly 35 feet, banking in a contested three that sent the crowd into a frenzy. It wasn't just a basket, it was a statement. A moment that told Seattle this game belonged to Indiana, no matter how improbable the roster looked on paper. But she wasn't alone. Lexi Hull, fresh off her frightening collision earlier in the night, came back to pull down 9 rebounds, playing with relentless energy and refusing to let the Storm dominate the glass. Aerial Powers chipped in with grit of her own, muscling through defenders, drawing fouls, and adding the kind of physical edge that made every possession a fight. Even Natasha Howard, often overlooked in the spotlight, brought toughness on both ends, attacking mismatches and giving the Fever valuable minutes inside. Together, this supporting cast created a safety net that allowed Mitchell and Boston to shine. Every hustle play, every extra pass, every defensive stand mattered. Without them, Mitchell's scoring and Boston's dominance might not have been enough. With them, Indiana turned into a complete, balanced machine that Seattle simply couldn't handle. After the game, Coach Stephanie White praised the collective effort, calling it the most complete team performance of the season. And she was right. This wasn't one player dragging a shorthanded roster to victory. This was a group effort, a team-wide refusal to back down. In a season defined by adversity, it was the so-called role players who showed that Indiana isn't just a team of stars. They're a roster built on resilience, and when their backs are against the wall, every single player is ready to step up. When the final buzzer echoed through Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the scoreboard showed a 95-75 blowout. But hidden inside those numbers was something far bigger. Indiana hadn't just beaten Seattle. They had written themselves into the record book 6 different times in one unforgettable night. Kelsey Mitchell stood at the forefront, passing Caitlin Clark's single-season scoring record while also climbing to the top of the league in 20-point performances. A statement that she isn't just a secondary option waiting for Clark's return, she's a centerpiece of her own. Aaliyah Boston carved her name alongside legends, reaching 1,000 rebounds faster than almost anyone in league history, and pairing it with 350 assists in record time. To be mentioned in the same breath as Candace Parker this early in her career? That's not just progress, that's destiny. Odyssey Sims added her own line to the history books, becoming one of the fastest Fever players to hit 50 points and 25 assists, a feat only Clark herself had achieved quicker. For a player signed mid-season on a hardship deal, that milestone underscored how seamlessly she's elevated the team. And perhaps the rarest of them all, Mitchell, Boston, and Sims. Each scored over 20 points and did it all in under 30 minutes. In the entire history of the WNBA, that kind of balance had only been seen a handful of times. For Indiana, it wasn't just rare, it was a revelation. 6 records, 1 night, and all of it came without Caitlin Clark setting foot on the floor. That fact alone sent a clear message. This isn't just one player's team. This is a roster capable of defying odds, rewriting history, and forcing the league to take notice. The victory wasn't just about standings or seeding. It was about identity. About proving that even with their superstar sidelined, Indiana is already building a foundation of toughness, depth, and firepower that no one should overlook. The Indiana Fever walked into Gainbridge Fieldhouse that night, battered, undermanned, and carrying the weight of playoff pressure. They walked out having redefined who they are. 6 records broken, a 20-point statement win, and a performance that silenced every doubt about whether this team could survive without its brightest star. But here's the part that makes the story even more dangerous for the rest of the league. Caitlin Clark is coming back. Imagine a team that just dismantled Seattle without its floor general, suddenly adding back the league's most electrifying playmaker. A team that proved its toughness with Hull's grit, its depth with Sims and Powers, its firepower with Mitchell, and its dominance with Boston, now pairing all of that with Clark's vision, range, and flair. That's not just a playoff team, that's a contender in the making. This season may have been framed as Clark's rookie showcase, but nights like this prove the Fever are more than a one-woman story. They are building something bigger, a culture of resilience, of stars stepping up when tested, of role players refusing to be overlooked. And when Clark returns to that lineup, she's stepping into a team that's already battle-tested, already bonded through adversity, and already capable of beating anyone. The truth is, the Fever's biggest win wasn't the 95-75 score. It was the realization that they don't have to wait for the future. It's already here. So the question isn't whether Indiana will survive until Clark is back. The question is how far they'll go once she is.